have a problem with the way that you voted because it went against my very livelihood, and I'm not going to be around you this holiday.
The media meltdown is now getting kind of nasty. I'm Brad Polumbo, and welcome back to the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across the internet and across our politics from an independent perspective. Today, we're catching up on the latest election meltdowns over at MSNBC and CNN, which are getting really toxic and nasty, and checking in on some of our influencer friends who aren't coping well with the election results. First things first, we've got to check in on this MSNBC segment that's going viral, because what this woke academic just said on live television is actually evil. A Yale University psychiatrist, Dr. Amanda Calhoun, joined MSNBC's Joy Reid for an election-related mental health discussion, and boy, the segment is one of the worst things I've ever watched. Let's take a listen to the first bit from the host, Joy Reid, that sets an interesting framing for their conversation.
Yeah, and we know that there's been a vast increase since the election, 700% increase in calls from LGBTQ youth to the Trevor Project, which offers a phone, online chat, or text to people. 700% increase in calls, texts, and chats compared to prior weeks. So people are scared, but they don't know what's going to happen to them. But I wonder if also are people challenged with the idea of how do you interact with people who you know voted for this? Right? If you are an LGBTQ person and you know someone in your family voted essentially against your rights, or you're a woman knowing that, this man was calling people the B word, J.D. Vance was literally calling Kamala Harris the trash and said, we're going to take out the trash. I know a lot of Black women were incredibly triggered by that. And if you then meet somebody and you know they voted for the people who called you trash, or if you're Puerto Rican, and you know someone voted that way, do you recommend, just from a psychological standpoint, being around them? We got the holidays coming up.
So before we get into this professor's insane response to that already insane question, I want to go through this prompt a little bit, what Joy Reid said here. First and foremost, I want to talk about the fact she mentioned at the top, that LGBT activist nonprofits that focus on mental health and unaliving prevention, the S word, have seen a huge uptick in calls and activity since the election results. And she's attempting to blame that on Trumpers or whatever, but you should actually be looking in the mirror, Joy. That is a tragic outcome, that so many young people are in such intense distress, but it has a lot more to do with the fear-mongering and hysteria and doomsday rhetoric coming out of the media and coming from online social media activists that's scaring young people into thinking that gay people are going to be killed, or gay marriage is going to be overturned, or that trans people are going to be forced to detransition, or a bunch of things that have no basis in reality that you've convinced them are going to happen with your fear porn and propaganda. So it's not Trump voters' fault that young people are in this much distress. It is the fault of the people who have misled them into a state of hysteria that is not justified by the facts. You should be reckoning with that and taking accountability, not attempting to pin the blame for it on the other side. And I just don't accept the premise that a Trump voter voted against my rights as a gay person at all. Trump is pro-gay marriage. He's not going to seek to overturn gay marriage. And in fact, he'll probably appoint some high-ranking gay officials like Rick Grinnell. Now, he may pursue some kinds of restrictions on transgender-related issues, but some of those are justified and I think make sense, like restricting the medical transition of minors or biological males competing in women's sports. Those are common sense. That's not an unjust attack on anybody's rights. And you know what? If Trump goes further on some things and gets into restricting the liberty and freedom of trans adults, I will raise the alarm and I will push back on that. But we don't actually know exactly what he's going to do. And regardless, it's not going to be a doomsday level scenario the way they're making it out to be. And I'm sorry, are we really supposed to be scandalized by Trump calling someone the B word? That part just went over my head because he said so many more offensive things than that. People talk that way about people all the time. That's really not a big deal. I can't imagine basing my vote around that. The same way, Black women are not triggered by somebody calling their political opponent trash. Maybe a few highly educated elite Black women like yourself, Joy, who live in echo chambers and bubbles might be triggered over it because you have the emotional resilience of a toddler, but that's just a normal insult people say about other people. And I wish our politics were more polite. I think Trump is incredibly coarse and rude to his political opponents, but it's not just him. And frankly, if you think they haven't said incredibly nasty things about him and about Republicans, both in private and public, you're kidding yourself. And calling someone trash is just an insult. It's not racist. If you think he wouldn't say the same about Biden or Hillary Clinton, you're kidding yourself. Now let's get into this Yale psychiatrist's response to Joy Reid's unhinged question, which is where this clip truly goes off the rails.
So I love that you asked this question because, there is a push, I think just a societal norm that if somebody is your family, that they are entitled to your time. And I think the answer is absolutely not. So if you are going into a situation where you have family members, where you have close friends who have voted in ways that are against you, like what you said, against your livelihood, and it's completely fine to not be around those people and to tell them why, to say, I have a problem with the way that you voted because it went against my very livelihood and I'm not going to be around you this holiday. I need to take some space for me. And I actually talk to, adults as well as advising parents for children. I mean, I think, I don't think that you should force children. I don't think you should force adults to be around people just because they're your family. I think there's a level of, need to establish boundaries. And if you feel like you need to establish boundaries with people, whether they're your family or not, I think you should very much be entitled to do so. And I think it may be essential for your mental health.
Sorry, but if you need to draw boundaries that mean excluding everyone from your life who doesn't agree with you, then you're the problem. You lack the emotional fortitude of a functioning adult. You are remarkably close-minded and intolerant. And I just can't believe you have a psychiatrist here telling people to cut off their friends and family over political differences as if that's not going to make everyone's life worse. Who listens to that? Cut off your family, even if you have, an otherwise healthy relationship with them because of political differences. They're just evil and bad and you should have boundaries from them. And sure, nobody should be forced to see their family. I'm not going to say send the cops in and make Karen go see her parents on Christmas, but the idea that you'd be encouraging that as a mental health practitioner, as if that's going to lead people to have happier lives, isolating yourself from friends and family with whom you could have a perfectly positive relationship and just maybe not talk about politics or even, dare I say, discuss your differences like grown-ups. But no, you could even just not talk about it. No, this lady thinks you need to cut off your family, isolate yourself, and somehow that's going to be good for your mental health. No, babe, it's going to push you into more of an echo chamber. It's going to isolate you. You're going to become more radical and more intolerant, more out of touch with what the other side actually believes. And you're going to miss out on meaningful, positive, healthy relationships in your life where you could otherwise be benefiting and thriving. And it's really sad and sick to see somebody who's supposed to be a mental health expert advocating for people to worsen their mental health. Now, of course, there's some exceptions that if your family are Trump supporters and they're like trolling you or insulting you or demeaning you, or like they're mistreating you somehow because of politics, that's a different story than if they just disagree with you. The idea that you would cut them off over disagreement alone is so absurd, and it rings so evil to me, right? As somebody who doesn't have a relationship with my father, who doesn't have a dad in their life, the idea that you would cast one away who wants to be in your life, who wants to be positive, all because you vote differently at the ballot box and you're not able to be an adult and handle those differences and disagreements maturely, is so deeply offensive and maddening to all the people who have estranged relationships with their family or who have lost them and have the family members who've passed away. Like, you are incredibly lucky. And you're just not only taking it for granted, you're actively throwing it away. It's truly sick stuff that a competent mental health professional would encourage you to not do, not go on national television and tell people to do this. It's lunacy. Now, I don't expect you guys to take psychiatry advice from a YouTuber. So here's somebody who I like a lot, I follow on Twitter, Michael Zifra, who is a physician from Chicago, a psychiatrist. Here's his thread responding to this clip. He writes, "This is terrible advice from a psychiatrist. Yes, many are feeling anxious, upset, and uncertain, but cutting off otherwise healthy relationships with family and friends over political differences will not lead to any healing and will likely just prolong your emotional pain. That said, some families may want to leave political topics off the table at upcoming holiday gatherings, especially if those discussions are likely to lead to arguments that are unproductive and too heated. Obviously, the above advice does not apply if you are experiencing genuine emotional abuse at the hands of your family and you need to do what is necessary to protect yourself. But bear in mind, merely holding an alternative political opinion is not emotional abuse." Guys, inject that last sentence directly into my veins, because these people really do think that. They really do think that having opinions that hurt their fifis is a form of mental or emotional abuse. That's how they treat it. Now, why do we get treated to these insane takes from supposed experts and professionals? One, I think it's the fact that our institutions, in particular academia, have been just infected with a corrosive and toxic left-wing ideology. But two, it's the media incentive structures, as one commentator astutely pointed out. He replied to Michael and said, "She won't get TV time if she doesn't say what she said. Nobody on those networks wants to hear positive opinions." To which Michael replied, "That's very true, unfortunately." And I agree. If she was saying, you know, we might disagree with Trump voters, but try to just have healthy conversations at the Thanksgiving table. And if it's too much, just maybe announce to everyone we're going to avoid politics. If she was saying that like something commonsensical, she wouldn't get booked on Joy Reid. She wouldn't get to be on glitz and glam and go have her hair and makeup done in a big studio and be on cable news nationwide and get all the attention that comes with that. It's a very toxic media ecosystem, and it encourages people to have extreme takes that will get them attention. But I have a very simple request for members of the media. If you want to have a meltdown over the election and you don't mind us laughing at you, continue, by all means. But please, don't do it in a way where you are actively encouraging Americans to make their lives worse. That shouldn't be too much to ask. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, and do hit that like button while you're at it and make sure you're subscribed. Remember, guys, I do read the comments and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. So leave your thoughts down below. And if you leave your comment with a super chat or a super thanks, I'll definitely respond to it on tomorrow's show. Now we got to check in on another liberal cable news network, because a woke CNN guest just freaked out on a black conservative for the dumbest reason imaginable. Basically, CNN host Abby Phillips, who I actually give a lot of credit, still hosts a wide variety of guests on her nightly show. She has actual conservatives and Republicans on almost every night, alongside left-wing Looney Tunes, in my book, and they actually have discussions. But sometimes those discussions turn into shouting matches or meltdowns, like they did just the other night, where a woke author freaked out at Shermichael for saying something that honestly a majority of Americans basically believe. Let's take a look at this clip, and beware, it turns into a shouting match.
I think there are a lot of families out there who don't believe boys should play girls' sports.
They're not boys. I'm not going to listen to transphobia at this table. I am not going to listen to you call a trans girl a boy.
Are you going to allow me to finish my explanation?
When you use a word that's a slur, I'm going to interrupt. That's not how it is. They're not boys. They're not boys. They're not playing girls' softball. I'm not going to sit there and listen to that.
Let's reset for a second, because, look, this is a really heated issue, right? And Shermichael, I know you. I know that you understand that people have different views on this. I think out of respect for Jay, let's try to talk about this in a way that is respectful.
Okay, so let me rephrase this, since I'm being targeted here.
I don't. Just to be clear, you are not being
but
targeted.
I am. But it's okay.
I'm specifically saying that I know that you are not intending to be transphobic.
He should know that I'm not. But he wants to sit here and bloviate.
I'm saying you're using a phrase that you know.
So the way regular people interpret it,
that's not regular people. That's not regular people. There's no consensus that these are actually boys. This whole thing about trans girls is a canard. We're talking about a tiny, tiny sliver of the population.
That may be the
and we're using that
my point in terms
to take away healthcare from thousands of people.
Hold on, just get to your point.
My point in terms of its effectiveness. Regular people with children look at these things and they say, you know what, this is a bit too far. I do not agree with this. I don't like this. I think Democrats are going way too much to the left on social issues. They're uncomfortable with it. A lot of people believe that. A lot of families believe that. You may disagree with that reality, but that's why Republicans kept running those ads over and over and over again, because they saw the metrics suggested
and
that they were
lying
working.
in those ads over and over again, and using rhetoric like you just used, saying this is boys playing girls sports.
Well,
First of all, we're talking about
what's the
5 people
language?
in the
What's the
entire
language
country.
you would prefer?
We're talking about trans girls being allowed to play with the people who are in their gender. And if you don't believe, you don't have to listen to me. Listen to the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association.
The American Medical Association.
This is not about the issue,
Guys,
right?
just one second.
This is about trying.
So the first thing that bothers me about this guy, who is apparently a woke rabbi, really interesting fellow, is his entitlement. I'm not gonna sit here and listen to transphobia at this table. Excuse me, sir. You're a guest on a panel. This is not your show. You are not in charge, and you don't have the right to dictate and control what everyone else can say according to your feelings, especially in a news conversation on a political talk show where both sides are supposed to be represented. You don't get to shout over the other side because you lack the emotional resilience of a functioning adult. I can and have many times sat on a panel and heard or sat across from someone saying things I strongly disagree with, and sometimes I interject or I argue back, but I've never acted as if I'm entitled to enter a space and not have anything said that I don't agree with or that hurts my feelings. And accusing Shermichael of using slurs is ridiculous. He referred to trans girls as boys. That is an opinion held by almost everyone until 5 minutes ago, and still at least half the country, that you can't actually change your gender or your sex. Now, I probably would have said males and focused on the fact that their sex doesn't change regardless of their gender identity, but using boys as shorthand is not a slur. It is just a disagreement. To see this guy fly into an all-out meltdown on live national television because somebody expressed such a common an incredibly mainstream sentiment is really telling of what echo chambers these people live in. And just kudos to Abby for slowly, I guess, trying to change it and have diversity at her panels, but how used to dominating the entire news media with just their perspectives, even minority perspectives, like believing that males should compete in girls' sports. True fringe minority perspectives of the public believe that, yet they have created the biggest media empires and news stations in the country into such ideological echo chambers that the normal mainstream opinion is a slur and can't be aired without triggering meltdowns from other guests. It's pathetic, and it's an indictment of everything that's wrong with mainstream media these days. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. And this kind of thing is why I don't regularly tune into cable news anymore. I just can't stand watching people melt down and freak out at each other instead of having open and honest and serious conversations. And now it's time for Brad versus TikTok, my daily segment where I take on the craziest ideas from the Clock app.
Pronoun of the day is slugs.
We're going to check in on some of our influencer friends from TikTok because they're still not coping well with Trump's win, and they are lashing out. Here's one particularly obnoxious video from a woman named Maddie who has tens of millions of followers on TikTok.
Maddie, I respect your opinion. How come you can't respect mine?
Good question. I think you should be able to.
Because there's a difference between opinions and facts.
And let me guess, all your opinions are facts, and all the people who disagree with you just have opinions that are based on non-facts. Sure.
Trump's a convicted felon. That's a fact.
Technically, yes, although that conviction may soon be overturned. But he was convicted of trumped-up felony charges by a highly partisan district attorney in New York over bookkeeping offenses. And even many liberal and progressive legal analysts thought the legal case behind these charges was far-fetched. Why would Americans care about him being convicted of that when there are so many more important issues in our politics that actually affect their day-to-day lives?
He has women. That's a fact.
No, it isn't. It's an allegation, and an incredibly serious and concerning one, but he has never been criminally convicted of any charge relating to the abuse of women. And we do believe in innocent till proven guilty in this country, my dear.
He has direct ties to people involved with Project 2025. That is a fact.
Yes, Trump has ties to some of the people involved in Project 2025. He's also repeatedly crapped all over it, said he doesn't support it, and released his own agenda that's very different from Project 2025 in a whole host of ways, from gay marriage to IVF and beyond. So, not sure what your point is.
Your opinion is that those facts don't matter. And my opinion is that those facts are bad. That's it.
Maddie, do you really think the world is as simple as your opinions are based on fact and everyone who disagrees with you just doesn't care about facts? Because there are so many facts that cut in the other direction. Inflation skyrocketed under the Biden-Harris administration, and they fueled it with massive stimulus spending. That's a fact. The border turned into an outright crisis under the Biden-Harris administration after they changed tons of Trump's immigration policies. That's a fact. 13 U.S. service members died as a direct result of the Biden-Harris administration's botched Afghanistan withdrawal. That's also a fact. Now, there are plenty of other facts that cut against Trump or cut in Biden and Harris's favor, but to try to distill down our political debate into facts versus non-facts is kindergarten level logic. And the fact that you would have such a shallow understanding of politics, but also be so close-minded as to want to discard or block or unfollow people who disagree with you or condemn them all is really unfortunate. Up next, we've got to check in with another one of our TikToker friends, because Spencois is absolutely losing it over the election and lashing out at his followers. Here's what he posted in advance of the election that people are now trolling him for.
If you won't accept Trump as your president, then leave. Okay. Like, you didn't have to tell me twice. Like, I was planning on leaving anyways.
Remember that. Guys, remember that one. He's planning on leaving anyways. Bye, girl. Don't let the door hit ya.
Like, was that supposed to be threatening? Was that supposed to be your way of one-upping me? Because in reality, you're just telling me something I've already thought about doing. Trump is a scary man. Like, he is terrifying. So if he becomes president, I have no problem leaving. If I saw Trump approaching me on the street, I would run in the opposite direction. My fight or flight would kick in and I'd turn into Usain Bolt. He's literally talked about starting all-out wars, getting rid of the LGBTQ plus community, destroying reproductive care, getting rid of immigrants, even though this country was literally built by immigrants.
What? Trump started no new wars as president last time and says he wants to negotiate ends to some of the conflicts the US is currently involved in. In getting rid of the LGBT community? Spencer, what are you talking about? Trump is pro-gay marriage and appointed high-level gay officials to his administration last time around. He does favor some restrictions on transgender issues, but nobody's talking about getting rid of anyone. You need to touch grass. As far as destroying reproductive care, Trump is pro-IVF and wants to make it available to all taxpayers, actually, and says he doesn't favor a federal abortion ban and wants to leave it to the states. So, not sure what you're on about, but okay. And getting rid of immigrants is such an absurd thing to say. You are conflating legal, lawful immigrants with illegal immigrants, with undocumented immigrants. Those are not the same thing. And it's actually really offensive to legal immigrants for you to suggest otherwise. Now, I don't support Trump's plans for mass deportations. I think deportations should be targeted and focused on people who are actively harming the communities that they're in. But it's not too much to ask that when you critique Trump's immigration views, you remain tethered to reality, at least somewhat.
Moral of the story, I don't feel safe around Trump. Kamala, on the other hand, I look at her and I feel safer. If I saw Kamala Harris walking in my general direction on the street, the Secret Service would literally have to stop me from running into her arms and having her hold me like a baby.
Spencer, that's not normal. If you like Kamala, fine. If you voted for Kamala, fine. But like, that's not a normal level of emotional relationship or attachment to have to a politician. Now, of course, now that Trump has won, people are trolling Spencer and asking him when he's buying his plane ticket, when he's going, when he's following through on his clear promise to leave the country if Trump wins. And he's suddenly obfuscating or kind of making it sound like, well, I was just saying maybe, while also wishing terrible things on Trump supporters.
Here we go with the Trumpies in my comment section. I mentioned the other day that if Trump got reelected as president, I have no problem leaving the country.
Well, no, you didn't say I have no problem doing it. Well, you did say that, but you also said, yeah, I'm planning on doing it. So now people, and it's not all Trump supporters, it's also people like me, are checking in to ask how your plans are going, when you'll be following through on these promises, because we're sick of annoying liberal people whining and complaining about how they're going to flee the country if Trump wins, and they never do. It's not unreasonable for people to ask that you actually practice what you preach when you're an influencer who reaches millions of people online every day.
And the second Trump got reelected, my comment section started looking like this. Hey, so did you book that flight? So are you leaving or what? Are you not leaving this country? When are you leaving? Did you pack your bags? Pack your bags. Book that flight, buddy. When you leaving? First of all, Trump isn't in office yet. We still have until January. Second of all, clearly I haven't packed my bags and left the country yet. But I'm not surprised that you Trumpies would think that the second that man got reelected, I'd be flying out of the country first thing, considering half of you can't read above the first grade reading level.
Yeah, Trump supporters just can't read. They're just illiterate. How many times do they have to lose before the liberal elites realize that their elitism and arrogance and smugness is exactly why so many people from such diverse walks of life are all trending towards Trump? But keep insulting everyone, looking down on everyone. It's working out great for you.
However, if I didn't make myself clear before, let me reiterate. I said I have no problem leaving if Trump is reelected. And bitch, I meant that. I've already been looking up working visas in other countries. I've also been getting in contact with friends from other countries.
Good. Go. And don't come back. Let's replace you with an immigrant who wants to come to this country and work hard and loves America and will add more value to our country than hysterical screaming into the camera with unhinged propaganda. Now, here's where this video gets really, frankly, evil.
But if anybody should be leaving, or I guess the proper term would be evacuating, it should be you guys. Because it looks like there's a hurricane coming your way. And you know, I hate to say it, but it looks like Hurricane Raphael is gonna be touching down in a lot of red states. And I'm sure a lot of you airheads are still under the impression that these Democrats are the ones that made a weather machine to destroy the red states. But bitch, nobody has time for that. But you know who does have time for that? God. If this isn't a divine sign from the Lord himself, I don't know what is.
Babe, this is actually evil. You just gleefully took joy out of the fact that a natural disaster is heading the way of people who disagree with you politically, including 40% odd of them who didn't vote for Trump, by the way, and tons of children below voting age. And regardless, just because people voted differently than you doesn't mean they deserve to have their homes destroyed or be killed in a natural disaster. That's actually evil. Have you no empathy or compassion for your fellow Americans at all anymore? And to say it's a sign from God not only is really ridiculous and offensive, also makes no sense, because presumably God's hand is at work in the presidential election, if you believe in that kind of thing. The truth is, you're just engaging in low IQ, hateful trolling because of your distorted political worldview that you've formed through consumption of incoherent propaganda. So yeah, people are following up to see if you're going to leave the country like you said you would, because we would all be better off. That's just my take. You guys let me know what you think in the comments below of these influencers and how they're coping, and do hit that like button to reward my suffering. And now, I'll wrap up today's show by reading a few of your comments from recent episodes. One person says, as an independent voter, though I voted for Trump for the first time November 5th, I view my vote more as a condemnation of leftist ideologies like critical race theory, oppressed/oppressor, white and working class hate that the Democratic Party pushes. I honestly don't see a path going forward where I'd ever vote for them again. I do think a lot of people voted not so much for Trump, but against the establishment status quo of the Biden-Harris administration and the general toxic ideology and worldview of the progressive movement and progressive media in the US. You'd think they would want to reflect on that and change so they could win elections going forward, but don't hold your breath waiting on that one, because you might pass out. Another person comments, never feel bad for laughing at these people. I'm sick of people being shamed for laughing at people posting their meltdowns and psychodramas on the internet. People need to get it into their heads that when you choose to put yourself out here on social media, you're putting yourself out there for public consumption, and you don't get to dictate how the public chooses to consume you. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a fair point. Nobody forced them to set up their tripods and record themselves and upload it to the internet. And if people make fun of you, I mean, 1 + 1 = 2. What did you expect? I'm not going to be feeling too sympathetic for you if you do that, although I do feel a little bit bad for how brainwashed some of these people are by fear-mongering and propaganda. Another person writes, my father, a USAF Academy grad, always said that getting into Harvard wasn't nearly as prestigious as they want you to believe. It's actually much harder to get into any of the military academies. When he passed in 2017, I went to work the next day. He would have wanted me to. Life goes on despite our feelings, and last time I checked, feelings aren't viable currency. Well, thanks for your comment, and I'm sorry about your father, but it sounds like he left a great legacy in you. Another person says, if you cannot control your emotions because millions of people didn't vote how you wanted, you are not old enough to vote. Yeah, I agree, but unfortunately, there's just no feasible way of measuring people's emotional maturity and then restricting the vote based on that, or maybe I'd be in favor. Another person writes, hey Brad, the military trusted 21-year-old me to operate a nuclear reactor, but it sounds like a university wouldn't have trusted me with a protractor unless I had an ample supply of lemon bars, cocoa, and I assume hugs. Maybe dropping out of college wasn't such a bad decision after all. Also, your wardrobe has been fire lately. Please let your boyfriend know he's doing a great job. Well, I'm sure he'll be happy to hear that, and he does listen to the podcast, so he will. And yeah, I always find it remarkable the way they coddle 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22-year-olds at universities when people that same age are out there working, raising families, serving in the military, and so on, but they have to treat their students like toddlers. I don't buy it. I don't. Another person says, if I was the Dems, I would go back to the drawing board and focus on the 2026 midterms. I would push for more moderation in the Democratic Party, cleaning up blue cities, coming out against child transitioning and not sending billions overseas, supporting free speech. And most importantly, I would stop shaming people who don't always vote with the party. For example, fear-mongering, name-calling, etc. And maybe, have an actual primary for the candidates. They could really make a change for the better before they lose even more voters. However, something tells me they won't learn their lesson. Yeah, I agree. I think it wouldn't be that hard for them to pivot and still run on a democratic platform of safe and legal and rare for abortion and of more government spending for healthcare and affordability and other things, but roll back a lot of the insane woke stuff, say you support free speech, and stop insulting Americans all the time. I think they do quite well, but I don't think the radicals in their party will let them get away with that kind of a pivot. Another person writes, the leftist media really has the minds of these people warped. I relate to your pain when you were single, Brad. Imagine being black, gay, and conservative leaning. Clearly, I have had many pointless conversations because I voted for Trump, and I always ended up making the Kamala supporters look stupid because they had no reason for voting for her except identity politics, the murder of the unborn, and Trump bad. Dude, I so do not envy you. I'm so lucky I found my partner and we had similar values because dating was an absolute nightmare for me. And so many people would want nothing to do with me because of my views and my work. And then others, it would just get really hostile and be debates. Or then I would encounter some, Republicans, but they were mad that I wasn't supportive enough of Trump or whatever. It was an absolute nightmare, especially living in Washington, D.C. at the time, as I did, where all the gays are hyper political. It was so toxic, and I really lucked out. Another person says, so the preacher dude is way off course, and the reason why I don't do the church thing, by the way, if the left doesn't know what a woman is, how can they assume women voted for Trump? I love your show. You make me giggle. I would have loved for somebody in an interview during the campaign to ask Kamala Harris, what is a woman? Her response would have been, word salad, incoherent for the ages. Another person says, thanks, Brad. Love your podcast. I am Australian and delighted to be so. I think that the time has come for a guide to reliable news sources, open-minded universities, etc. What do you think? Possible? Love your work, by the way. Particularly love your lively eyebrows. Yeah, I get a lot of comments on my eyebrows, and that sounds like something worth doing, honestly. But it is hard because even at many media outlets that I would say are biased, there are still individual reporters or columnists who I think you can trust and do good work, and vice versa as well. There are some outlets that I think are great, but there's individuals there who I wouldn't trust. So it would be hard to put together a guide, just green list what you can trust and what you can't. Like a red list, it actually would be harder to do that because it wouldn't have the full nuance of the media landscape. All right, everybody, that's it for this episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. Please do make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Do hit that like button before you go, and do comment with your thoughts. I love reading the comments and hearing what you guys have to say, and I do pick a few to respond to in every episode. Plus, if you leave your comment with a super chat or a super thanks, I'll definitely respond to it on tomorrow's show. And with that, we'll chat again tomorrow.